Pregame.com.
Aloha. I am Steve Fezzik here with Bryan Leonard, breaking down pregame.tv. Golden Nugget games of the year, 250 lines out for games throughout the year. It was a busy Friday, Bryan, for both you and I.
Busy whole weekend for both of us, I'm sure.
It's funny what goes into making these lines. Why don't you go ahead and let people know how long you've been working on setting lines and how late you were up on Thursday night prepping.
Yeah, basically what we're doing is we take our closing line, at least this is what I do. I take my closing lines from the year before. I look at the superstars, basically those kind of players that are going to be leaving. A big NFL draft player that went to Central Michigan means a whole lot more to that team than a guy who went to Alabama. So basically I get rid of those players. I have an idea of what is coming in. And I get on Twitter and I follow the Twitter and everything, and I adjust my lines. And then I take a look at, then the magazines come out.
When you say you adjust your lines, you adjust your power range.
I adjust my power range, excuse me. And when the line, or excuse me, the sportsbooks, the books pertaining to sports and college football hit the market, I read what I can. Phil Steele's comes out and make final adjustments, and I go in with a set of numbers, and you have in your head that there's certain teams you're looking to play. Unfortunately, you don't know what the sportsbook is going to put out. You don't know what they like in these games. So many times I will go in saying I'm going to be playing Team A. Turns out I'm betting against Team A.
It's more like you're the odds maker. You're setting a line, and if the book has an opinion, they're basically forcing you to go ahead and fire. And even on bets, just to use an example that you wouldn't normally like, Colorado was getting 37 points at home against Oregon. We're very high on Oregon. We're very down on Colorado, and we like Colorado plus 37 because the number just didn't match, right?
My number, I didn't play that one. My number says there was value on Colorado. My thoughts on that, and this is trial and error, I've lost on this before, when you have a team like an Oregon, who's a really popular team, scores a lot of points, is going to be undefeated when they play Colorado. As the season goes on, they continue to cover spreads, and I found out that by the time those games came on, I was getting better lines if I would have waited. So we're putting up a dime, 1,100 on these games, so I would rather put that money towards something else where I think I can get a better line later.
Sure, and we're on somewhat of the same page where I have a little note, when I put that ticket in my safe deposit box, I put a big circle on the calendar on some of the games. It's like, don't be an idiot. Bet Oregon minus 31. Because I think Oregon will kill them, and I think I would never want to bet Colorado on a market number. I'm just betting because I don't think it's going to be a market number. It's like I don't care if Oregon beats everybody by 100 the first 5 weeks. A phenomenon I've seen this in college football. We've seen this. The top 10 keeps covering, right. and then what happens? The money pours in on Washington State inexplicably against Stanford, and the line crashes from 22 down to 18, and then right after the national anthem, Stanford's up 21-0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went into it, and there were many teams. For Northwestern, for example, I liked Northwestern this year. I was hoping to play Northwestern.
I thought I liked them,
and I had Northwestern here. Golden Nugget had Northwestern here, so I couldn't play Northwestern, but I ended up playing against Northwestern a few times.
Sure, like Michigan, for instance, was getting 3 points against Northwestern. I don't think I've ever seen or had Michigan power rated above, below Northwestern. So you look at lines like that, you see them laying 10.5 at Cal, laying 12 at Iowa. Did Kirk Ferentz, did something happen to him? Was there an auto accident? It's like, crazy numbers.
Yeah, we ended up taking Cal in that game, and I know Cal's young. I know it's early in the season. I know they're not a team I should be backing, but I also know, and being from Cleveland, you're all from Dayton area, we know Big Ten teams never travel west, and when they do, they never cover. So to get a home dog of double digits against a Big Ten team traveling, those were the first few I checked off.
Right, and I think that as far as basic strategy does kick in, where we take a quick look, is it a really good spot or a really bad spot on the schedule? But I'm not looking at each and every one. I'm just making sure that I don't want to be betting against a team off a bye when my team has played 9 straight weeks, things like that. Mm-hmm. But one thing people ask, well, wait a minute, you can only bet $1,000. You got to wait in line. It's hard to get the numbers. Somewhat of a hassle. Why do it? You want to maybe elaborate on that?
My point. Somebody on the forums at pregame.com the other day put in that exact same thing, and people will drive. And I know you're guilty of this, not being guilty, but I know that you do it. You will drive 10 miles out of your way 9 o'clock at night on a Friday night when the wife is sitting home with the kid and you want to spend time with them, so you can grab a half a point because it's the only half a point better in town. People will do that. I've done it. You do it a lot more than I am. I give you a lot of credit for that. Why don't people drive down the Gold Nugget on these games that are 10 points off of what the game's going to be?
I think 10 is a little bit of a stretch.
I'll next time I come in, I'll bring in my averages because I keep every bet I make.
But I think more than likely in a situation like that, if Gold Nugget makes a line 21 and you make it 31, I would argue the correct number is probably 26. So you have a
numbers don't mean as much.
You have a good bet. But it's probably not as good as you thought. But still, nevertheless, and I think what it is like it really is the delayed recognition of things. For instance, if you and I, if we could just go to the gym, and when we walked out of the gym,
what is this gym you refer to?
We were down 20. We would lose 20 pounds the second we walked on out, and it would say you've been credited a 20-pound weight gain because you're going to work out 3 times a week for the rest of the year. And so, but no, it doesn't work. You have to work out the 3 times first for the 3 months before you see that. And the same thing's really true with these bets. They're great come October 31st. When you're starting to add them all up, but in the meantime, you got a long summer that you're not making anything.
And I found a lot of people don't want to tie up their money for a long period of time. So you find some guys that will go in and they'll play week 1, week 2, which leaves the rest of the year with plenty of opportunities because everybody's worried about the beginning of the season, and as the season goes on, you're getting more advantages because as opposed, and another reason why we like to do it, as opposed to game day, I'm competing against millions and millions of sports bettors. On this count, I'm competing against, 12 guys?
Right.
And that's a big advantage.
And one thing I've often done is like when I show up and I'm not first in line, let's say they're like an infinite a number of windows open. There were 4 of them at the Gold Nugget, which was very good. But let's assume there were 10 windows, all right? If I was like 12th in line, all right, and I get in there, my immediate thought is I'm starting at week 4, and going down. It's like I'm not going to be like in on the feeding frenzy on the week 1 lines.
Right.
I know I'm not going to get the Minnesota minus 13 against UNLV. I'm not going to get the Vandy plus 4 hosting Ole Miss. I'm not going to get the Clemson plus 3.5 early in the year hosting Georgia because the obvious early bets where the Gold Nuggets taking a stance or an opinion, boom, someone's going to go ahead and beat those, me to the punch. So I'll look and play the Washington State plus 19, against one of the Arizona teams that's a little hidden, later on in the year.
And something else, I read a lot of knowledgeable people on Twitter, and they've been talking about the Gold Nugget. And they say the wise guys played against these teams, wise guys played on these teams. Well, that's not correct. Wise guys found value based on those lines on these teams. That does not mean come week 1 or whatever, hey, we took a ton of Iowa. Iowa's a team we want to bet on. No, not necessarily. Iowa was a team, in my opinion, the Golden Nugget rated too low. Now, after we have bet them, I think you had some Iowa, the line's getting up to where it should have been, and maybe there is no value on Iowa.
But you said some of the lines are off by like up to 10 points. So you would argue a few of those, maybe there's still value.
There is some value. And, we got an Iowa team, they don't score a lot of points, but they don't give up many either. And, for example, they played, I think, Northwestern. It was line 12, I think I got.
Down to 8.5.
Yeah, I got plus 12 in a game that they're only going to give up 25 points on. How do you...
And Iowa was getting 4, then 3, now 2, playing Iowa State. And have we ever seen Iowa State chalk in that game ever? It's almost like we know that come when they actually deal that game, it wouldn't surprise me Iowa erroneously opens -2,
And when you take a look, people are going to say, well, Iowa State beat them the last 2 years. Well, they beat them each time by 3. And before that, Iowa completely dominated.
I'm sure they didn't beat them as favorites. They upset them. And reputations are still going to occur with all that. So, and one thing too, I think it jumpstarts my own handicapping, where I can look at all these lines, and I can tell you every year, like week 2, week 3, I get a good bet, if nothing else, because I know where these lines settled in. And people tend to say, well, it's the Gold Nugget lines, they're irrelevant. But they're not irrelevant come August 20th. We've had all summer forever the best bettors in the world, or some of them, or even a few of them, to go on over and bet. By August 20th, the Gold Nugget board, even though it's a $1,000 limit, I'd argue that's one of the sharpest boards in the world because everyone's had a whack at it.
I will, Tommy Miller better than I do. Last year, I went in 3 or 4 weeks into the season, and I wanted to get updated lines as it goes on. Have you talked to him at all? Is he going to keep these on the board and tweak them every week?
Well, I did talk to Tony, and he's he's certainly up for looking at certain things. I think what it goes back to is there the betting interest, to go ahead and do that each and every week? Does it justify the time that he and Aaron and everyone have to put into?
Yeah.
So I think they'll evaluate, and maybe they'll do it on a select number of teams. I know Jay Cornegay over at the LVH has fewer games, so he can continually update them. But to update 250, and frankly, I think he even after your performance last year, he hinted to me that he would let everyone do that, but you, because you did so well.
Especially when I don't call him by his first name.
That's. Tommy, Billy.
Doesn't matter. Half the time they ignore you when you walk in there anyway,
does not matter. So I was going to let that one slide. All right. But I think one thing before we wrap up is the Golden Nugget put out a clinic for everyone on how to handle an opening number situation. They advertised it. They leaked all the numbers out to the press, sent it all out. Everyone had those numbers way ahead of time, 3 hours ahead of time, to be ready to fire. That's the way to do things. And then they said they'd open it up at 1 o'clock p.m. At 12:59, betting the windows were open. Yeah,
we had done it a couple of years before that, and we've had to wait, and we've gone through the bad part. It's a learning experience for them, learning experience for us. And, Steve and I are down there every year. The last 3 years I've been down there, last 4 years with you, and unfortunately competing with you for these numbers. But it's something that is well worth it if you do your work ahead of time. I can fully understand the guys that aren't ready. You don't want to waste your time on it. But if you've got your work done already, you want to compete against 12 guys as opposed to 2 million when Saturdays come around during the regular season.
Absolutely. Very good stuff here. Pregame.tv we'll be talking all summer long about some of these games of the year and breaking it down. And never too early. The early bird gets the worm. Stay with us, Pregame.tv.